Greetings, baseball fans. Four Friends 1679 here, and welcoming you back to Cigarettes and Bubblegum, an ongoing series of baseball retrospectives looking at popular narratives with a critical eye. If you enjoy this kind of content, please be sure to like, subscribe, comment, and help me get my channel on the map. Today, we've got an issue that I would like to examine, and I feel that coming on the heels of the all-time Negro League All-Stars video might be the perfect time to examine the implication of making the Negro Leagues into major leagues. Yeah, this might be another hot one. Up front, let's acknowledge something. White dude here. And yes, of course, that is bound to influence what the recognition of Negro League Baseball by MLB is bound to mean to me. One of the reasons I wanted to do this after the all-time Negro League All-Stars video, which if you haven't seen, and based on the view numbers, you haven't, go check it out on the homepage of Cigarettes and Bubblegum. That's at Four Friends 1679. I wanted to do this essay after posting that video in hopes that it would dispel any idea that anything I'm about to say should be read as disparaging towards the black ball players prior to the integration of the National and American Leagues in 1947. I hope that you all in some small way appreciate that if I thought less of those men, I would not have put as much work into or had as much fun as I did making that video. Make no mistake, I am a fan and I honor their history. Period. But, you knew that I do have a couple of problems with the idea of calling them major leagues, and last time I'm going to say it, this has nothing to do with the overall talent. I'll leave those arguments for the anti-woke brigade and the actual racists, and will otherwise leave it alone. From 1949 to 1959, black ball players won 9 of those 11 National League MVP awards and tacked on 7 more in the 1960s. So there's no doubt that the top-tier Negro League talent was on par with the top-tier talent of white baseball. But I do have 2 issues with this, and while I admit that both are probably a bit petty and personal, I want to put them out there all the same. The first is a matter of simple math. Their seasons were, at most, half as long, and the record of their leagues remains incomplete. It's a lot closer than it used to be, but there's no doubt some information is still missing. There's also the issue of what does and does not constitute an official game. When you hear about Josh Gibson hitting 1,000 home runs, or whatever, understand that this is probably exaggerated, but also includes totals from barnstorming games, exhibitions, unofficial interleague games, winter ball, etc. His official count is 176, and the impressive record is 12 home run championships, which ties him with Babe Ruth. Short seasons aside, I'll give him that one. He dominated the second Negro National League in the 1930s and 40s in a similar manner to how Ruth dominated the American League in the 1920s and 30s. And the next guy down is Mike Schmidt with 8. So credit where it's due, Gibson could rake. But there are 2 records he's been credited with that I just can't grant him. The headline read, "Now that the Negro Leagues are major leagues, Ty Cobb is no longer the all-time batting leader. His former record of 366 has been passed by Josh Gibson's new record of 372. And on top of that, Gibson is credited by some with the new single-season batting average record of 466. And I can remember my dad telling me that Ted Williams would probably be rolling in his grave if he knew that people were saying he was no longer the last 400 hitter. But Ted Williams used the opportunity of his Hall of Fame induction speech to become one of the first to call for the inclusion of Negro League players in the Hall of Fame, mentioning Satchel Paige and Josh Gibson specifically. So I think he'd be fine with Gibson's 1943 season being recognized, but Cobb's record, here's my problem. Josh Gibson hit 372 over 2,301 at-bats. Cobb had over 11,000 at-bats. Now, I'm not saying that a guy necessarily has to be ranked in the top 11 all-time in at-bats to qualify for a rate stat record, but 2,300 just seems like not enough. Just as an example, at the end of the 1988 season, Wade Boggs was sitting 3rd all-time with a 356 average over 3,913 at-bats, 1,600 more than Gibson had, and he was just 43 hits shy, 6 hits per season so far, plus 1, shy of sitting in the top spot for career average. Suppose he had those 6+ hits per season and retired after 1988. Would we recognize him as the all-time batting leader at 367, knowing that he was only 30 years old, would no doubt decline, and had just over a third of the at-bats that Cobb did? Seems cheap. Seems improbable. But we'd stick an asterisk on that, wouldn't we? Baseball Reference avoids this issue by cutting off its rate stat leaderboards at 5,000 plate appearances. That's the equivalent of 10 qualifying seasons under a modern 162-game schedule. That seems reasonable, even if it does end up excluding the Negro League players almost entirely. What's more, if you still want to grant Gibson the all-time record, then he loses the single-season record. That same year, 1943, Titello Vargas won the batting title in that same league, hitting .472 over 123 at-bats, versus Gibson's .466 over 249 at-bats. But Vargas still qualifies, as his New York Cubans had only played 39 official games in the Negro National League that season. So 121 plate appearances is enough for Vargas's 1943 season to count. If it's fair to do that to Cobb for the all-time record, then it's fair to do the same to Gibson for the single-season record. But you see how complicated this gets when teams don't play 154 or 162 games in a season. But that's all just math. Honestly, this amounts to a fairly minor gripe, easily addressed with some basic limits for minimum plate appearances and innings pitched. The real problem I have is with the whole situation, how it was handled, and who was at the helm at the time. Because if Bill James, for example, had said, we should recognize Negro League players as having the same level of talent as that of the all-white leagues and appreciate their accomplishments as such back in the mid-90s, for example, I would have had zero issue with that. But it wasn't some historian or statistician. It wasn't somebody who shares my appreciation for the game and its history. It was Commissioner Rob Manfred, the CEO of MLB Incorporated. And because of that, because it was Manfred and MLB Inc., the whole thing feels less like a recognition of their achievements and instead vaguely appropriative to me. Like he just reached out with his grubby little hands and said, this is mine too now. And maybe that's not fair. Maybe I'm having a flare-up of Manfred derangement syndrome. It's possible. But if you, like me, feel that baseball isn't the same as it was when you were a kid, there's a reason for that. Well, there are countless reasons for that, but the one that is relevant to this discussion is that in 2000, the American and National Leagues merged under the new integrated banner of MLB, a minor reorganization going mostly unnoticed at the time, but prior to this, the AL and NL were each their own independent professional leagues. They each had their own league president, and the commissioner's office functioned as more of a governing body in a mostly judgment and oversight role. In 2000, with the merger of the two leagues, the position of AL and NL president were eliminated. MLB became a single entity and started being run far more like one huge corporation than it had been in the past. One league with one executive acting more like a CEO than a commissioner. And it is through that lens that I view all of this. The actions of one huge corporate monopoly seeing this cool thing that people like, and with a stroke of a pen and not a penny paid out as far as I'm aware, saying, congratulations, you belong to me now. And while I am sure 100% that most black people relish the recognition this grants the Negro Leagues, personally, I would rather tell Rob Manfred, no, f*** you, you can't have this. You can't just go and appropriate this awesome thing that exists specifically because the league you now run wrongfully excluded these players in the first place. You don't get to take the thing that these players, having been told no, went and created themselves with no help at all from your league, and then say it's yours. No, you can't have it. The whole thing just reeks of too much corporate appropriation for me to sit back and be grateful for what I'm sure was meant as an honorable recognition. And I'm absolutely fine with the recognition part. I just say leave that for the Hall of Fame, a non-profit entity completely independent from MLB. MLB doesn't deserve to take this incredible history, created entirely by the players it discriminated against, and say that it's part of their history now. MLB does not deserve that. MLB has not earned that. Anyway, I'm curious to hear your thoughts. I'm sure I'm not entirely alone in feeling the way I do, but I figure it remains a statistically unusual position to have. Hopefully you found it an interesting perspective, food for thought anyway, and hopefully the comments section doesn't blow up with racism adjacent commentary. We'll see. Either way, please like and subscribe, and until next time, I do hope to see you at the ballpark.